Prince of Persia: Warrior Within is the 2004 follow-up to Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time.
Warrior Within made a U-turn by creating a completely different atmosphere and overall tone. But for everything it seems to improve on, it seems to fall short on something else. About that switch in tone, Sands of Time has an Arabian fairy tale atmosphere with Arabian music, telling a heroic story, peaceful use of colors and lighting. Warrior Within, on the other hand, greatly reduces saturation. It has dark environments, adds blood, has more violent fights, and there's rock music banging through your speakers. Personally, I like them both. Hearing the epic metal music during a chase scene can give a big adrenaline rush, but I do prefer the style of Sands of Time over this one, since the game had a better balance between peaceful moments and intense moments. Since Warrior Within has this gritty and serious tone throughout the entire game, it never gives you a moment like that. It's always serious and just too gritty for its own good. Even the character of the prince became much darker and rather unlikable due to the circumstances he's thrown in. He looks and sounds very different than he did in Sands of Time, like you're playing a completely different character.
And since his personality is a bit too tough to swallow, this prince just isn't the kind of character you root for.
The strength of this story lies in the mysteries. Throughout the story, they drop multiple clues on what's really going on or how the prince is going to get out of the tight situation he's in. These mysteries work really well and create suspense, making it look like there's a lot more to this island than meets the eye. It's a cool twist that plays with your knowledge of previous events, but compared to the previous game, it's quite a step back due to the lack of likable characters and its overly serious tone. The gameplay is where I find Warrior Within to be a great improvement over Sands of Time. Gameplay-wise, Warrior Within does almost everything better. It has new enemies that are more difficult and require many more different approaches to beat instead of doing a single move all over again. There are way more combo options and some useful powers, new obstacles that are more challenging, the secrets are much better hidden and much more rewarding to find, the end boss is a million times better, there's even an alternative end boss and alternative ending. However, the downside to this fighting system is that Warrior Within rarely gives you a break from fighting. A lot of places you go to, there are enemies waiting for you. There's never a part where you just do some platforming without at least one enemy attacking you. After a while, I've found myself ignoring multiple fights, as well as trying to end some fights as quickly as possible by throwing all enemies off the cliffs. There's only one puzzle in the entire game, which is a loss, and this puzzle is easier than any of the puzzles in Sands of Time. They definitely chose a more action-driven approach this time around, and while the fighting itself is a lot better, the variation is not nearly as smooth this time. The last remarkable difference compared to the Sands of Time is the level design. Both these games take place at one location, but where Sands of Time had a linear path that did not allow you to revisit any of the older areas, Warrior Within has one big location where you're able to revisit most areas in the game. The ups to this decision are that the world feels more logically connected, and it allows you to revisit places in order to find secrets you weren't able to get earlier. The downside to this design is that there are certain parts you need to traverse multiple times over the course of the entire game, making it more repetitive than Sands of Time, where each level is completely different.
And since there's no practical map to speak of, it's easy to get lost in Warrior Within. As a result, the game also has a slower pace than its predecessor, and can sometimes feel a tad dull.
Near the end of the game, this character flips the gameplay around a bit. I love the design of this monster, the story building up to it, and gameplay-wise it gives a nice touch of variation compared to the playstyle of the prince. It does, however, make for very easy sword fights. Even the boss battle in between is way too easy. Last but not least, the end bosses. While the end battle is decent in difficulty and it's a great improvement over the boss from the first game, it's too similar to the fight you had earlier in the game, not giving it the satisfaction an end boss needs. However, when I saw this ending, it raised a ton of questions and I couldn't wait to see how the story would continue. In this case, a cliffhanger was the perfect note to end on. A satisfying ending with a not so satisfying end boss. The alternative end boss, however, is one of my personal favorite bosses of all time. This is one of the toughest bosses I've ever faced. Both plot-wise and gameplay-wise, I think the alternative end boss is a great end boss that's definitely worth the extra effort it takes to reach. However, I am less satisfied with the alternative ending you get. In many aspects, the same thing from the other ending happen. You even get a hint and it stops there. So what do I dislike about it? The females of this game are more sexualized than any other Prince of Persia game. It didn't bother me because they still tried to give them development and tell a story with them, until this point where they threw all character development out of the window for some fan service.
So ultimately, you're left with a good game that might have been great.
My least favorite of the Sands of Time trilogy.
But again, the game itself is good, and if you can get past its forced, unoriginal, and really irritating grimness, you'll still have fun in Prince of Persia: Warrior Within.